Hey, what's up guys, Scott here with the Tech Vlog, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Samsung Galaxy Tab A 7-inch. I want to start off with the design of the tablet. This is actually what stood out to me most. It's actually a little bit thicker and a little bit more squared off than I was expecting. But aside from that, if you've ever used any sort of Samsung product in the past, this definitely has that very signature Samsung look, with the home button on the front followed by the back and menu keys to the side. And speaking of the back and menu keys, they actually do not light up, so if you're in a dark place or if you're in an area where it's kind of hard to see them, it can be kind of difficult to hunt these down and find these at times. And they are a little bit on the smaller side, so if you're kind of hunting around, sometimes you don't always hit them. Aside from that is where you have a very unusual Samsung thing where they actually put the volume and power buttons on the same side. Now when I first got this, I wasn't sure if I was going to like this, but I really like this a lot more than, say, the S7 Edge. It doesn't really have any differential between the two buttons, but they are very easy to find and figure out between each other, and they're actually really nice to have on the same side. And along the top is where you have a little bit of an interesting design choice by Samsung. They actually put the headphone jack up here, which is not unusual, but they also put the charging port up here as well. It's nothing terrible, but I did notice at times if I did use the tablet while it was plugged in, it was nicer to have the charger on the bottom so that way you can kind of have something to rest your hand on when not press the menu or back buttons by accident. But with it being at the top, if you use it in portrait mode, it can kind of make it feel a little weighted down at times, and it can be a little hard to kind of figure out where the cable needs to go. But really, aside from that, it wasn't that big of a deal, as I really didn't have to use it too much while I was plugged in. Along the left side, all you have is your SD card slot, and I'll give you a little bit of a pro tip here. Don't pull it out too much, just pull it out just a little bit and then push it down. I never actually broke it, but it definitely feels kind of, it's a flap and it definitely feels like you could break it pretty easily, so you just want to be careful there, don't go too crazy on it. And along the back is where you'll find your speaker, which actually gets quite loud and has a fair amount of bass to it. If you're going to use it for watching movies or listening to music, you know, it's going to do good for that. It's not going to be anything that blows you away, especially at the tablet this price, but I did notice that it could get kind of distorted depending on what you had it facing towards, with it being in the back. And I did find that it kind of favored my left ear over my right ear, which is kind of weird when I was watching some YouTube videos and whatnot sometimes. Just depending on the way I had the tablet turned, that's what it would do. But aside from that, it does pretty good. Thanks to the camera hump, you actually don't get too much distortion when you set it on a hard surface, but if you set it on something like a bed or a couch, you know, something that's kind of fabric or softer, then you definitely notice that it gets muffled very easily. But aside from that, I didn't have any major problems with the speaker. And next to the speaker is where you'll find your camera. It's a 2 megapixel camera on the front, which does alright. I mean, if you just want to take a couple quick selfies, maybe your cell phone's across the room, you know, this is definitely going to do alright, especially if you just upload to Instagram or share with family and friends and whatnot. And along the back, you have a 5 megapixel camera, which does alright. It is definitely missing detail, you know, it's not very sharp, it doesn't have very good color accuracy, you know, it definitely doesn't do well in low light. But again, if you're just going to use this for just a quick photo, maybe your smartphone's across the room, or you just need something really quick, you're just going to upload to Instagram, you don't really expect a whole lot, you know, this is going to do just fine. And in general, the back is a very slippery texture. It's a very slippery plastic texture that I found myself kind of holding onto the tablet onto the sides, whether it was in portrait or landscape mode. Now, if you do get this tablet and you kind of find yourself holding onto the back a lot more, you're definitely going to want to think about picking up a case, as there's going to be a high probability of dropping this with just how slick that back can be. So now let's get into one of the areas I was most curious about in this tablet, and that's just how well does it perform. It's got a 1.3 gigahertz quad-core processor and a 1.5 GB of RAM. Now, I have to say the performance of the tablet was actually very good. The only time I really noticed the less RAM was when I kind of went a little bit farther back in multitasking. You know, may load the apps a little bit more than, let's say, something that has a little bit more RAM. Watching YouTube videos, watching movies, you know, playing some games, everything did very well. Even with the Samsung skin on top, I didn't have really any stuttering or major issues. There were a couple of these Samsung glitches, you know, that happen from time to time. But really, aside from that, I had no major problems with the performance, even when into battery saving mode, and I was actually very happy with how it performed. And now we get into one of the biggest disappointments of the tablet, and that's actually the screen. It's running at 1280 by 800, it's a 7-inch screen. It looks alright when you're watching videos or playing some games, but if you plan to do any sort of reading, you're definitely going to have a little bit of trouble there. It does feature a reading mode, but I really didn't find that to help out too much. If you're going to mainly be using this tablet indoors, you're going to be doing alright, but as soon as you take this tablet outside, it gets very difficult to see, and it definitely does not get bright enough for outside, even with the outdoor mode on. And I did find that the outdoor mode can actually kind of wash out the image on the screen, so if you're reading or anything, it can make it even a little bit more difficult to read. But just in general, I had a very hard time with this tablet, even in a shaded area. Just being outdoor in general, it really wasn't that good of an experience when it came to viewing the screen, and I was kind of hoping more, especially since this is a Samsung product. Usually they're pretty good with their screens, even on their lower end devices. Another area of this tablet I was disappointed in was actually the battery life. I didn't get anywhere near the 11 hours that Samsung claimed you're going to get. I didn't expect to, but I was at least hoping for about 5 hours. Usually I go by about half of what they, you know, are going to say that you're going to get, and even on half brightness, I would struggle to have 3 to 4 hours at times. And if I cranked that up to full brightness with outdoor mode, I would be lucky to hit 2 hours. So if you're going to mainly be using this inside, you're going to be alright, but you know, if you're going to travel with this or anything, you're definitely going to want to pick up a battery bank or something, or you might look at some other tablets. It's just the battery life just really is not there, and I was actually hoping for a little bit more. The standby time is good, so there was no issues, you know, with the battery drain or anything like that. But just overall, I wish the battery life was a little bit better. And a few last notes: keep in mind that there is no fast or wireless charging in this device, and it only has wireless in single band. There's no dual band wireless in or 5 gigahertz, you know, wireless in, and of course there's no AC. So that I did notice that at times the internet could struggle a little bit. I definitely noticed a lot more signal drop than I would expect with something that has a little bit, you know, like wireless in dual band or wireless AC. And I also did find it to also struggle with network, kind of hitting 15 megabits per second, kind of seemed about, you know, where it maxed out. I would get up to 25 every once in a while, just depending on where it was with the router, but I did notice that signal drop, definitely the speed dropped a lot faster than what you might be used to with newer devices that might have wireless AC. And another thing to note of is that it's running Android 5.1.1, which isn't terrible. It's still getting security updates, but it is getting a little bit older now, and there are some nice advantages with Android 6 and now Android 7, so if you're kind of looking for those, you know, definitely keep that in mind while you're looking at this tablet. And one big note I want to put on this is it's only got 8 gigabytes of storage, and half of that is taken up by the system. So if you might think about getting an SD card, or if you know that the apps you can use are going to be moved to the SD card, that's good. Not all apps can be moved to the SD card, so do keep that in mind. But if you're mainly going to use this for streaming or just some very small apps, you're going to do just fine. And even movies, as you can put the movies on the SD card. But as you get into the apps, especially if you want to do any larger games, like, you know, I know some of the games can take up quite a bit of space. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at this. All in all, I came to the conclusion that this is an indoor tablet. It's got kids mode on it, so it's definitely aimed towards kids. It's definitely not a traveling tablet. It's not one that's meant to go outside, but this is definitely a nice tablet just to have around the house, and especially with the prices I've seen this at recently. When I was originally looking at this, it was about $150, but now I've seen it as low as like $75. So if you're just looking for something to kind of have around the house, maybe you already got a tablet, but you want one somewhere else just to have for quick information, or maybe even home automation, whatever it may be, this is definitely a good tablet and definitely one to look at. Unfortunately, the battery life and the screen are kind of a little bit of hit and miss on this, but just overall, I did have a good experience, and it did work out pretty well. If you're definitely looking at this, and if the price is right, I'll definitely link down below to the lowest price I can find, as well as a few other accessories that you might think about getting with this. It's not the best, but what it does offer, especially at some of the prices that I've seen, it does it very well. So, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe and check out all the other videos I do on this channel. If there's anything that you think about this tablet that maybe I didn't mention in this, go and leave that in the comments down below. If you have any questions, I can definitely try to answer them about this as best as I can. And definitely, if there's anything else you want to see me review, leave those in the comments down below. And as always, thanks for watching.